Hello and good morning to you all. I welcome you all in our today's session. Today we will continue our discussion on medieval philosophy. We started our discussion about medieval philosophy in our last lecture, since some of the things were not touched. So from our today's lecture, we will come to know about the very basic traits and characteristics of the medieval philosophy. So before I begin, I mean, about the discussion about those, so I'd like to just give you a recap of the previous discussion so that it will help you to understand the later part of today's lecture. So, as you can see, we already know that around 1000 years, that is the span of the medieval philosophy of that time. So, for around 1000 years, the history of philosophy in Europe had been that of the Greek thinkers, beginning with the pre-Socratics on through those in Hellenistic times. I hope you understand what does it mean Hellenistic. Uh, can anyone tell me what does it mean Hellenistic? Any idea? Do you have any idea? Masum, can you tell me what does it mean Hellenistic? Masum, can you tell me?
Sir,
Dil Mushraq, Mimi? Mimi, you are there. I can see you. What does it mean Hellenistic, Mimi?
Sorry, sir. I can't.
Anyone? Riazul, can you tell me what does it mean Hellenistic? Can you give it a try?
স্যার হেলেনিস্টিক বলতে হচ্ছে গ্রিক সময়কার ফিলোসফিটা বোঝাচ্ছে স্যার।
You're very close, but not exactly the Greek time. I mean, it's not the contemporary Greek time, but Hellenistic is the later development. And they are the philosophers or the educators or academicians of that time. They felt a kind of attachment or affinity to the Greek philosophy or Greek, whatever you say, the Greek science, philosophy, or education, anything that you name. So either speaking Greek language or something related with the Greek, that is called Hellenistic, because it was not the contemporary of that time. It is later development. So later on, when people they became interested about the, I mean, Greek philosophy and different philosophers, especially in different parts of the Europe, they started studying and using the philosophy, especially Plato and Aristotle, and also some of the pre-Socratic philosophers. Philosophies also they were using. So this affinity to the Greek philosophical education, that is called Hellenistic. So this Hellenistic times, that is after this Greek philosophy, not at the, I mean, the same time or the contemporary of the Plato and Aristotle. Not that time is Hellenistic. The later development or attachment to the Greek philosophy, that is called Hellenistic times. So we can see that how these philosophies actually influenced this medieval period. Then, and also the people were embracing Christianity. So you can see that Christianity swept through the Roman Empire by around 400 CE or Christian era. The face of philosophy was dramatically changed along with every other cultural institutions of the time. So different other cultural institutions, or you can see the changes in traditions, cultures, and rites and rituals. So along with those changes, there were also changes that can be felt or it was observed at that time because of these influence of Greek philosophy. So the Christianity was there. It was people were embracing Christianity. More people they were actually they were converting themselves into Christianity, and at the same time, the philosophy of the Greek philosophy was also there. So the combination of Christianity and Greek philosophy, we can say that is the trademark, or we can say the hallmarks of the medieval period or medieval philosophy. This new phase of philosophy also lasted for about 1000 years and is called medieval philosophy, named after medieval period of European history. So we know that, so I don't want to go for further clarification. Rather, we'll focus on other stuff. Now, the transition from the Greek to medieval philosophy was a rough one, and it exhibits a love-hate relationship that Christian culture had with Greek civilization. On the one hand, Christianity brought with it cultural and intellectual tradition from the land of Israel that was very much at odds with Greek ways of thinking. So one way there is Christianity, and we know the Christianity actually it's evolved from the land of Israel. I mean, present day you can say the Palestine. And at that time, when Christianity started, it was people were coming to know about Christianity, and it was becoming very popular at that time. So at the very first stage of the Christianity, it has a kind of uh, enmity with the Greek philosophy. So they didn't embrace the Greek philosophy to rationalize Christianity. So at the heart of the difference was the Bible and its central themes of monotheistic God, life after death, and perhaps most importantly, the idea of rather in the kingdom of God. So while actually lie the difference, or we can say the bone of contention, or the reasons for this kind of contention, these are the things. In the Greek philosophy, we can say, okay, you tell me, was Greek in Greek philosophy, did we see that their faith or their belief, the religious belief, it was monotheistic or it was polytheistic? What do you say?
স্যার পলিথিস্টিক ছিল স্যার গ্রিক বিলিভটা।
Because they believed in many gods and goddesses, right? So when you try to use that philosophy to explain your religion, especially if the religion is monotheistic, then obviously you can assume that certainly there are going to be some kind of conflicts between the philosophy and the religion because Christianity is monotheistic God. And also we have seen that in Greek philosophy, or the way actually they explain gods and goddesses and also their faith in gods and goddesses, it doesn't talk about the hereafter or the afterlife that much. But we know that in monotheistic religion, especially in Christianity, Judaism, and also in Islam, the life after death is very important. It plays a vital role. It determines our activities in this world, life after death. So it's very much, in that sense, life after death is very much deterministic because it determines our activities on this world. But in Greek philosophy, we don't find this life after death. I mean, the importance of life after death is not there. And also, another important thing is that in Christianity or in Judaism or even in Islam, in this kind of monotheistic religion, we have seen that we have a tendency to expand our kingdom, the kingdom of God. That means Christianity or Christian people, they try to convince people to embrace Christianity. That was the part. But in Greek philosophy, in gods and the gods and goddesses, or these mythical figures that we can see, they actually don't have these kind of missionaries the way the Christianity it has. Still, it has the missionaries. Missionaries means the mission. The mission is to propagate Christianity and to expand the kingdom of God. So that is the idea. So in Greek philosophy, we don't witness that kind of tendencies or these kind of tendencies. These monotheistic God, life after death, and the expansion of the kingdom of God. So we don't find this. So as a result, what happened that when Christianity was there for the first time, when it came into existence after the Jesus Christ, so it had some conflicts with the existing Western philosophies, and which was quite obvious. And the obvious reasons for that, we have already said that monotheistic God, life after death, or we can say the judgment day, we believe in the judgment day, that is the thing, and also the expansion of the kingdom of God. So these were the main regions of conflict between the existing gods and goddesses in Greece and the Christianity. Now, as Christian emperors took the throne, they took decisive measures to curb the influence of cultural institutions that conflicted with the Christian lesson. So you see more and more emperors, they embraced Christianity. And after embracing Christianity, so they took decisive measures. They took initiatives to uh, to stop the influence or to proscribe the influence or to hinder the influence of the cultural institutions that conflicted with the Christian message. That means Christianity, its message was important. So if the existing philosophies or existing norms, if it had any kind of conflict with the Christian masses, then in that case, those conflicting rites and rituals, they were to be obliterated. They were to be annihilated by the emperors. Understood? Have you understood this? Is that clear?
No, sir. Can you repeat?
Okay, let me finish this slide and I'll explain it in Bangla. Then
Okay.
orders were given to destroy all pagan temples and shut down the schools of philosophy that had been in operation since the days of Plato and Aristotle. On the other hand, however, the new breed of Christian philosophers was greatly influenced by Greek thought, especially the views of Aristotle and Plotinus. Now, here, as you can see, since those emperors, they became Christian, so they stopped all those schools of philosophy. Those are influenced by the Plato and Aristotle. So all these schools were shut down, and the new breed of Christian philosophers, that means philosophers who embrace Christianity, now they were also greatly influenced by Greek thought, especially Aristotle and Plotinus. But still, you can see the emperor or the government at that time, they didn't want to indulge these Greek philosophy schools based on these philosophies. So they shut down all those schools, and Christianity was the norm, and they encouraged, or sometimes they emphasized, or they forced people to embrace Christianity and to practice Christianity and to shun or to give up the previous Greek philosophies that they were used to practice. Now, let me explain these things very briefly in Bengali. যখন খ্রিস্টান এম্পারাররা খ্রিস্টানিটি তারা এমব্রেস করা শুরু করলেন, তখন যেটা হলো যে তারা কিছু খুব সিদ্ধান্ত নিলেন, বেশ কিছু পদক্ষেপ গ্রহণ করলেন, এবং এই পদক্ষেপগুলো ছিল খুবই চূড়ান্ত রকমের পদক্ষেপ। যে সকল কালচারাল ইনস্টিটিউশনস বা প্রতিষ্ঠান তারা যে আগে ফিলসফি প্র্যাকটিস করতো, সেগুলোর যদি খ্রিস্টানিটির সাথে তার যদি কোনো কনফ্লিক্ট থাকতো বা খ্রিস্টানিটির সাথে সেটা যদি ম্যাচ না করতো, সেক্ষেত্রে ইনস্টিটিউশন বা কালচার এগুলোকে তাদের চেঞ্জ করে ফেলতো। খ্রিস্টানিটির সাথে তাদেরকে মানানসই হতে হবে, এবং সেই সাথে যত পেগান টেম্পলস, অর্থাৎ যারা মূর্তি পূজকদের যত যে মন্দির বা প্রার্থনা ঘর যেগুলো ছিল, সেগুলোকে ধ্বংস করে দেওয়া হলো। এবং স্কুলস অফ ফিলসফি, যেগুলো গ্রিক ফিলসফি বা অ্যারিস্টটলের ফিলসফিতে যে সকল স্কুল আমরা জানি, যে লাইসিয়াম অ্যান্ড অলসো প্লেটোর যে স্কুল ছিল, আমরা যেটাকে বলি প্লেটোটা একাডেমিয়া, লাইসিয়াম ছিল অ্যারিস্টটলের। তো এই সকল স্কুল বা যেগুলো ছিল, এগুলোকে সব বা এর আদলে এগুলোকে প্রভাবিত হয়ে যে সকল চর্চা চলতে ফিলসফি, সেগুলোকে তারা বন্ধ করে দেওয়ার নির্দেশ দিয়েছে। বোঝা গেছে বিষয়টা?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the next slide. Now, while Plato remained a towering figure in medieval times, it was largely a name. Only since for many centuries, copies of his writings rapidly vanished. You see, people, they admired, even in the medieval period, they admired Plato, and he was one of the most influential philosophers. People used to follow his philosophy. But in the medieval period, for centuries, many centuries, copies of his writings were unavailable. They completely vanished from the total scenario. So you couldn't see any more write-ups of Plato. People, they knew Plato. Some of them were also, they were acquainted with his philosophies, but they were not in practice. The people didn't practice this philosophy. They didn't talk about it that much. Though Plato, actually, he was revered or admired in that society. And in the absence of actual books by Plato, medieval philosophers looked to Plotinus for a summary of Plato's views, unaware of how original Plotinus' views were. Now, Plotinus, actually, he was a philosopher, and he used to live at that time in Egypt. But Egypt at that time, it was a part of Greece, the part of that empire. as you know. So Plotinus actually he used to, he revived these Platonic philosophy, Plato's philosophies. And that's also it is called Neoplatonism. So he introduced these things to the this Western philosophy or Western philosophers anew, in a new way, in a new fashion, and they were familiar with the Plato's works through Plotinus' works. Thus, many of the most important views that they attributed to Plato were those of Plotinus. So you see, people actually they thought that it was Plato, but actually it wasn't Plato's view. Those were Plotinus' view, because Plotinus was very much influential, and he introduced Plato's writings to the Western world, and also and at the same time he had his own philosophies, he had his own explanations. So those explanations and his philosophy sometimes they were confused as Plato's philosophy, but actually they were Plotinus philosophies. What we find within medieval philosophy then is an interesting blend of Greek and Greek and Christian views to the degree that thinkers of this period were able to make them compatible. You see, what we find within medieval philosophy then is an interesting blend of Greek and Christian views. So at the very beginning, there were conflicts between Christian and Greek philosophy, but at one point, philosophers, the Christian philosophers or the new breed of Christian philosophers, they use Greek philosophy to explain or to rationalize the Christian theologies. So we can see a blend or a mixture between Greek philosophy and Christianity. Do you have anything to say onto this slide? Do you need further explanation on anything? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, then I can move on. Now, historians mark of medieval civilization as starting with the downfall of the Roman Empire and ending with the founding of the Renaissance, roughly from the years 400 to 1500. So that is the period we have already mentioned it in our previous lecture. So when actually, so you see that it has started with the downfall of the Roman Empire. I mean, this medieval period started and ended when with the foundation of the Renaissance, the medieval period, it ended there. So 400, roughly, it's from 400 to 1500, so almost 1000 years. This range of time itself falls into three distinct periods, each of which impacted developments within medieval philosophy. So you see, so this medieval philosophy, it has been categorized at three different stages. The first period is the early Middle Ages. The first period, that is the early Middle Ages, around 400 to 1000, that is 600 years. First 600 years, roughly we can say that is the early Middle Ages, often called Dark Ages. So this is that famous denomination, which is much talked about, the Dark Ages, 400 to 1000. So this 600 is called Dark Ages of Europe. So it is characterized by tough times in the aftermath of the Roman Empire's collapse. So that aftermath of Roman Empire. So when the Roman Empire collapsed, we have already come to know about it, that at that time, those institutions that were used to work, so they didn't work anymore that in that sense, and a kind of disintegration that we can see in the Roman civilization. So because of that, the first 600, we didn't find any remarkable development in science and philosophy at that time in Europe. Now, here also, in the aftermath of the Roman Empire's collapse, including localized rule, decreased trade, mass migration, and feudalism. So with the fall of the Roman Empire, so we can see the localized rule. That means the Roman Empire, it was divided into different parts, different pieces of land, and different local rulers, actually, they started ruling their part of the Roman Empire. So there were no central control. I mean, the Roman Empire, they didn't have it in the center. Actually, they didn't have any control of these over these local rulers. So you can see the cultural disintegration and also the mass migration you can also witness at that time. People were moving from one part of the Roman Empire to the other part because of they wanted to earn their livelihood or for better opportunities. So they migrated from one part of the Roman Empire to the other part. So we can see the mass migration at that time. And it's also feudalism, because when uh, you don't find any central rule or command, then obviously feudalism will be the outcome. Feudalism means জমিদার প্রথা। বিভিন্ন জায়গাতে ছোট ছোট এরিয়া ভাগ ভাগ করে খন্ড খন্ড হয়ে গেছে, বিভিন্ন জায়গাতে বিভিন্ন জমিদার দখল করে নিয়ে তারা তাদের অংশের জমিদারিত্ব শুরু করলেন, বা ছোট ছোট রাজ্যে ভাগ হয়ে গেল। সেখানে ছোট ছোট রাজ্যের জন্য বিভিন্ন রাজা রানী বা এরকম তারা গড়ে উঠলো, এবং তারা সেখানে তার এরিয়াটা তারা লোকালি তারা সেগুলোকে রুল করা শুরু করলেন। তো এইভাবে ডিসইন্টিগ্রেটেড বা বিচ্ছিন্ন হয়ে গিয়েছিল টোটাল রোমান এম্পায়ারটা। তোমরা কি বুঝতে পেরেছো পর্যন্ত? ওয়াজ ইট ক্লিয়ার?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. Do you have any question? Any question? Okay, then I will jump to the next slide. Now, while this time frame witnessed the Christianization of Europe, Islam was also rapidly enveloping the surrounding regions, and as with Christianity, Muslims developed their own philosophical tradition that mixed Greek philosophy with their own faith. The next period is the High Middle Ages, from the 1000 to 1300, which experienced much better times. So you see, the Christianization of Europe, it was going on. People were embracing Christianity. And at the same time, Islam also, it was a growing religion. So people are also embracing Islam. And you can see the surrounding regions, they were conquered or captured by the Muslim rulers. And we can see that along with the Christianity, Muslims also developed their own philosophical tradition. So the Islam and the Greek philosophy, they also came in close contact, and also Islamic philosophers, they used Greek philosophy. And we can see the Islamic philosophy is heavily influenced, or it's significantly is influenced by the Greek philosophy. So we can see the confluence of the philosophy and faiths of different denominations at that time. The next period, so that's why this period, it is called, and you can see the span. So first 400 to 1000, these first 600, it was Dark Ages. And then the later 1000 to 1300, that is called High Middle Ages. Okay, and it was not Dark Ages, it was better than Dark Ages, because lots of scientific exploration, experimentation, and also geographical exploration was going on all around the world. And people from the European countries, actually, they were having all these experiences. So it was, the situation actually, it was much better than the previous centuries. Now, population increased, countries and regions regained political cohesion, and intellectual thought were revitalized. So it's the number of people, it was increasing at that time. So more people were there. So some of the European countries, we can see European cities, actually, they were crowded, and the countries and regions regained political cohesion. So we have witnessed that after the collapse or the downfall of the Roman Empire, the whole empire or the civilization, it was disintegrated. But later on, in the later part of the medieval age, we can witness that people were actually, they were trying to find cohesion. So societies or countries, it became cohesive, and intellectually they were revitalized. So intellectually, actually, they improved a lot. So they earned knowledge, and scientific experimentation or scientific advancement was also there at that time. So most important for philosophy, though, was the emergence of medieval universities, which became centers of learning and gave birth to a distinct philosophical method called scholasticism, which systematically blended philosophy and theology. Now, try to focus on the word scholasticism. Then what happened then? The philosophy, though, was the emergence of medieval. You can see the medieval universities. And in the medieval period, Oxford and Cambridge universities, and also many other renowned universities were established in different parts of Europe, in France, in Germany, and obviously in UK. So these universities actually they were producing very much intellectual figures in the world of the medieval ages, and uh, these academicians or these newly educated people with educated people from different universities in Europe, they started questioning the religion and also they started blending the philosophy, the Greek philosopher, classical philosophy. They started blending the classical philosophy with the theology. Understood what I'm saying? Do you get the point? এই নতুন স্কলাররা যারা এই যে বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে যাচ্ছেন, বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের ট্রেন্ডটা তখন শুরু হলো, নতুন নতুন কিছু বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় এস্টাবলিশ হলো এবং বিশেষ করে অক্সফোর্ড এবং ক্যামব্রিজ তখন সেখানে এস্টাবলিশ হয়েছিল অ্যাট দ্যাট টাইম। এবং সেখান থেকে স্টুডেন্টরা লেখাপড়া করছেন এবং তারা নতুন নতুন ধারণা নিয়ে আসছেন, যেটা ইউনিভার্সিটির কাজ, ধারণা তৈরি করা বা মানুষকে চিন্তা করতে তাদেরকে উৎসাহিত করে বা যোগ্য করে তোলে। তো তারা এই যোগ্য ব্যক্তিরা তখন কি করলেন, যে এক্সিস্টিং ফিলসফির সাথে তারা থিওলজি একটা ব্লেন্ড করার চেষ্টা করলেন, থিওলজিকে নতুন আঙ্গে তারা ব্যাখ্যা করার চেষ্টা করলেন। এই যে একটা মুভমেন্ট that started at that time, and these people, these scholars, they started thinking beyond the boundary of the religion, established boundaries of the religion. তারা এই বেঁধে দেওয়া যে বাউন্ডারি রিলিজনের, তার বাইরে থেকে তারা রিলিজনকে একটা নতুন পার্সপেক্টিভে তারা দেখবার, জানবার বা বুঝবার চেষ্টা করে। So at the very beginning of of this scholasticism, it wasn't taken positively. So scholars, especially the Christian scholars or the most of the experts in theology, they started blaming and complaining against these people. So they blamed them for distorting knowledge because they took help from the Greek philosophy and they blended it with the theology. So this blending of philosophy and theology, when it was done at that time, so that period of time, or this whole process is called scholasticism. The final period is the late Middle Ages, lasting from 300 to 1500, 1300 to 1500. So we can see the first 400 to 1000, then 1000 to 1300, 1200, and then from 1300 to 1500, the last part or the last segment of the medieval philosophy, Middle Ages. Times were again tough with economic stagnation, wars, and the Black Plague that killed around half of Europe's population. The unity of the Catholic Church also came under fire, which helped bring the Middle Ages as a whole to a close. So at that time, these 1300 to 1500, actually at that time, Europe, they experienced different kinds of tumultuous situations, and these situations are very difficult to handle. For example, economic stagnation, that means economy became stagnant, static. So there were not further advancement of the economy. অর্থনীতি স্থবির হয়ে গিয়েছিল। There were wars among different countries, different regions, and also Black Plague. You know it very well, the plague. Because of this plague and the wars, millions of Europeans actually they died. They fought against each other and they died. And that's why you can see they killed around half of Europe's population. Can you imagine that? Half of Europe's population actually they were killed by this Black Plague. So the number of people, it was also decreasing at that time in Europe. And the unity of the Catholic Church also came under fire. So among the Catholic Church, the unity, the uniformity, actually, it was crumbling down at that time in Europe. Have you understood? Do you need further explanation for this slide? Was it clear? Masum? Shoma, have you understood? Shoma, could you please unmute yourself? Shoma, whatever.
Yes, sir.
Saidul, did you get it?
Yes, sir.
Rahan, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Was it clear? Actually, what was the situation at that time at that time in Europe? So can you get it? Now, throughout the Middle Ages, you can see four specific issues attracted the attention of its greatest philosophers from the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith traditions. So, philosophers from all, all these three traditions actually, they were attracted by four definitions. So let's see what are these issues. The first, the first issue, the first is the relation between faith and reason, which involves whether important philosophical and religious beliefs are grounded in the authority of faith or in reason or in some combination of the two. So philosophers actually they started to fill in the relation or the influence of reason. So they started establishing the relation between faith and reason. So they were exploring the possibilities, the possibilities about the relationship between faith and reason. And you can say which involves whether important philosophical and religious beliefs are grounded in the authority of faith or in reason. That whether actually some specific philosophy that you can understand with the help of faith or with the help of reason or with the combination of both. So that was a quintessential question at that time, that to explore the relationship between faith and reason. And one of the most extreme proponents of the faith only proponents of the faith only position is the early church theologian, the Tertullian, whose views are encapsulated in two vivid statements that he makes. So in his statements, he gave importance on faith, and he was one of the proponents of the faith, and he positions that only faith can explain everything. So, and he was a church theologian. His name is Tertullian. And from his specific statements, we can understand it. Now, first, he asks the rhetorical questions. So this is his rhetorical question. What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? It's an interesting question. You can see the Athens here symbolizes reason and the tradition of great thinking. On the other hand, Jerusalem represents faith and the doctrines of Christianity that are held by faith. Do you understand the relationship between these two? We are influenced by Greek philosophy. And Greek philosophy, you can see the Athens, that is the loci, or you can see that is the center. Okay, that is the center or the locus of the Greek philosophy, that is Athens. And on the other hand, we have Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, that is the center point of the Christianity. So when Athens actually talks about reason, then Jerusalem, that talks about faith. Do you understand it? The relationship between these two? So this rhetorical question is very important. What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? That when we look up to Athens for the reason, then what does it have to do with Jerusalem? So does it have any relationship with the Athens and Jerusalem? Athens symbolizes reason and Jerusalem symbolizes faith, the Christian faith. Do you get the point, dear students? Hello? Is there anyone who has confusion? Anyone? Hurry up. We have 3 other issues that we have to cover up today. Is it clear to you? Sharmin, have you understood? Sharmin, is it clear? The first thing? This rhetorical question, have you understood it? Shamima Islam.
Yes, sir.
Okay, leave it. Your internet connection is very poor. I simply can understand you. Zain, are you there? Zain?
Yes, sir.
Have you understood the first question? This rhetorical question, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Have you understood it? বুঝতে পেরেছো বিষয়টা কি বুঝতে পেরেছো যেটা বললাম বোঝা গেছে জাইন তুমি বুঝতে পেরেছো হ্যালো Could you please unmute yourself, all of you? I'd like to see. I'd like to listen from you. Jane, please read the first sentence. Read it. You can see the screen and read it, please. Jane, can you read it?
নাই তো নাই
Jane, can you hear me? মেয়েটা কি আছে?
আছে স্যার।
আছে, কথা বলছে না কেন? ও যদি within 1 minute যদি পার্টিসিপেট না করে তাহলে ওকে আজকে অ্যাবসেন্ট করে দেবে। বুঝতে পারছো?
স্যার আমাকে ডাকছেন স্যার?
কে তুমি? তোমাকে ডাকলাম। Okay. Now, so after this rhetoric question, now we can see. So this is the you can see the relationship between faith and reason. Now, so what then does reason have to do with faith? This question comes from then what is the relationship between reason and faith? Now, he implied answer is nothing at all. So that is the answer of that theologian from the church. He says that they don't have any relationship. There is no relationship between reason and faith. His second famous statement is, I believe because it is absurd, which he wrote when discussing a Christian doctrine about the nature of Christ that went contrary to logic. So when he talked about the Christ and his existence and the nature or the features of the Christ, then he found that this is very absurd. There is no relationship between reason and faith. It's completely all about faith. There is nothing to do with the reason. There is Christ, the natures of Christ, you just have to believe in. You cannot have any reason for that. Understood?
Yes,
If you want to look for reasons, then you will find the reasons in it. It's just a matter of faith. There is Christ, there is God, that's it. His point is that reason obstructs our discovery of truth so much that we should expect truths of faith to run contrary to it. So he says that if you try to place reasons in everything, and if you try to use reasons or logic in everything, then you will find that it will obstruct your faith. It will make it difficult for you to believe in things. Thus, reason is not just a deed, just a dead end in pursuit of truth, but it is dangerously misleading. So he says that if you try to use reason in your faith, that is not only the dead end, that means you'll not find any way to go or you'll not find a place to go. Rather, it is also dangerously misleading. So you will be misled by reason if you try to use reason in your faith. While Tertullian may have been content with a faith on the position, other Christian philosophers held that reason could be an important asset in demonstrating some religious truths that we also know through faith. But besides that particular, theologian, other theologians from the Christian faith, they say that no, we can also use reason to explain faith because sometimes it is complementary. মাঝে মাঝে দেখা যায় যে faith এবং reason তারা একজন আরেকজনকে কমপ্লিমেন্ট করে, তারা একজন আরেকজনের পরিপূরক, তারা একজন আরেকজনের শত্রু না বা এনিমি না, এরকম যে faith আর reason একসাথে হতে পারবে না. It's not like that all the time. Okay. Now the second issue. A second issue of interest for medieval philosophers was providing the existence of God. So first is the combination of, the first issue is the reason and faith, the combination, whether actually we can have reason to understand faith, or we can have the combination of both, or we should go only for faith and we should omit reason from the scenario. So that was the first issue. The second issue is the existence of God. So many medieval philosophers argued that while we can certainly believe in God on the grounds of faith alone, there are rational proofs that we can also give to show God's existence. So in many cases, only we can have faith about God, that's it, to understand the existence of God. But there are also some cases where we can use reason or logic to understand the existence of God. So it's possible. So we can also use reason to understand the existence of God. Chief among these is a causal argument, motion and change in earth track back to a first cause, which is thought. So So he says that at the very beginning, the whole world was created. So God created the world and also the motion and change, so that we can see the motion and we can see the change on earth. So it's traced back to a first cause. So that is the first cause. And who caused it? Who caused the motion? Who created time? Who caused all these changes? The first thing is that is God. Now, several versions of this argument were put forward, some with a high level of sophistication. Other proofs for God's existence were also forthcoming, which used entirely different strategies. So, actually, the philosophers, they were using different kinds of strategies. সোজা কথা, সৃষ্টিকর্তার অস্তিত্ব বিশ্বাস ফেথ দিয়ে সেটা করা সম্ভব যে হ্যাঁ সৃষ্টিকর্তা আছেন। আবার কোনো কোনো ক্ষেত্রে আমরা লজিক ব্যবহার করে বা রিজন ব্যবহার করে সৃষ্টিকর্তার এক্সিস্টেন্সকে আমরা প্রমাণ করতে পারি বা আমরা সেটা উপলব্ধি করতে পারি। এবং কেউ কেউ সেটা করতে যে অনেক সফিস্টিকেটেড আর্গুমেন্টস দিয়েছেন, তারা প্রুভ করেছেন যে yes, we can use logics or we can use reasons, use different kinds of strategies to understand the existence of God. Now, the third issue was the problem of religious language. The religious language, sometimes they are very mysterious and sometimes they are very difficult to understand. Even if we know that God exists, can we say anything meaningful about him with human words? That means, is there anything human? Or are there words from the human that can declare the existence of God? মানুষের মুখনিসৃত কিছু আছে যেটা দিয়ে বলা যায় যে হ্যাঁ সৃষ্টিকর্তা এক্সিস্ট করতেছে। আমরা যেটাই বলতেছি সেটা তো বলছি ডিভাইন, সেটা উপর থেকে আসছে কোনো মানুষের উপরে, তারপরে আমরা সেটা নিয়ে বলছি যে দিস ইজ ডিভাইন এবং এই ডিভাইন স্ক্রিপচার্স থেকে আমরা বুঝতে পারি দেয়ার ইজ গড। কিন্তু এর বাইরে এই ডিভিনিটি বা ডিভাইন স্ক্রিপচার্সের বাইরে যে কি মানুষের মুখের কথায় সৃষ্টিকর্তার এক্সিস্টেন্সে কি প্রমাণ করা যায় বা বলে বা হয় বা আমরা শুনি না? We commonly describe God using words like powerful and good, but all of these seem tainted by our limited human experience. This is limited human experience means because our understanding is limited and we comprehend the existence of God by the words of God. আমরা সৃষ্টিকর্তার কথা দিয়ে সৃষ্টিকর্তাকে বুঝি, যেমন কোরআনের ভাষা সৃষ্টিকর্তার ভাষা, বাইবেলের ভাষা সৃষ্টিকর্তার ভাষা, জুদাইক ডিসক্রিপশন গুলো আছে আমরা সেগুলোকে বলি তওরা যেটাকে বলা হয়, সেটা কি আমরা বলি যেটা সৃষ্টিকর্তার ভাষা। সুতরাং আমরা সৃষ্টিকর্তাকে চিনি সৃষ্টিকর্তার ভাষা দিয়ে, কিন্তু মানুষের ভাষা দিয়ে কি বুঝি? আমরা কেন বুঝতে পারি না? Because it is tainted, it is colored in this way, it is said in this way that the human experience that is limited, you will not be able to understand the existence of God in your own words. Then should we give up describing God altogether? তাহলে কি সৃষ্টিকর্তাকে ডেসক্রাইব করা বাদ দিয়ে দিব মানুষের ভাষায়? গড যেটা বলেছেন সেইভাবেই শুধু সৃষ্টিকর্তাকে বুঝবো? Should we reinterpret our descriptions of God in special ways? Then in that case, should we have this adventure or should we have this audacity to explain God or to reinterpret the existence of God or the God himself? Should we describe it in your own way? The solutions that philosophers offer to this problem were both varied and original. So at the same time, there were different kinds of descriptions given by the philosophers about the description of the God or about the existence of the God. And sometimes some of these descriptions, they sounded very original, very authentic. Now the fourth issue. The fourth issue is the problem of universals, namely whether concepts such as greenness or largeness exist independently of human thought. That is, whether some of the things they exist, I mean, without our explanations, can we call them universals? For example, greenness, এই যে সবুজ, এই যে ব্যাপকতা, এই যে সবুজ বা শ্যামল আমরা যেটা বলি, এটি কি আসলে ইউনিভার্সাল? এটা কি ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্টলি হিউম্যান থটের বাইরে যে এটা এক্সিস্ট করতে পারে? এই গ্রিননেসটা কি হিউম্যান থটের বাইরে কি সে গ্রিন? এই যে ব্যাপকতা সেটা কি হিউম্যান থটের বাইরে যে কিছু ব্যাপক থাকে, নাকি হিউম্যান থট চিন্তা করে বলেই সেটা গ্রিন? আমি চিন্তা করি বলেই সেটা লাল, আমি লাল ভাবি বলেই লাল, আমি সবুজ ভাবি বলেই সেটা সবুজ, আমি সেটাকে ব্যাপক ভাবি বলেই সেটা ব্যাপক, আমি সেটাকে মহৎ ভাবি বলেই সেটা মহৎ, নাকি আমার ভাবনার বাইরে যেও সে মহৎ থাকে সেটা মহৎ থাকবে, আমার ভাবনার বাইরে যেও সেটা সবুজ থাকবে, সেটা ব্যাপক থাকবে, ঐশ্বরিক থাকবে? তোমরা কি বুঝতে পারছো এই অংশটুকু?
Yes, sir.
So independent of human thought, that is a crucial question, that whether actually we should depend on the human thought or still they can exist, all these things, all these phenomena, or you can see the situations or the qualities, still they can exist independently of human thought. So that is a crucial point of question, very philosophical question, you can say. The particular tree in front of me is green and large, but there are lots of other particular things that are also green or large, and thus, in some sense, share the more universal attribute of greenness or largeness. So same thing, that I can see only what is in front of me. So there are things that are, those are also green. So can I say that beyond my human thought? So those things are also green and existing as green. So should I ignore them or should I count them? So that is the problem. The question then is whether universal fact as greenness and largeness exist independent of human thought in some external reality, or whether they are just products of the human mind. So whether just they're existing in the external, in the external reality, that means the reality that we can see, that is external, or is only the product of the human mind. So medieval philosophers held every possible view on the subject, and in many ways, the problem of universals represents medieval philosophy at its best. So you can see the medieval philosophers held every possible view on the subject. So they try to explore all these things, that the external reality and also the mind, the human mind. So they try to explore the both ways, to try to explain all these, to find a solution to these four issues, using all these things. So in many ways, the problem of universal represents medieval philosophy at its best. So medieval philosophy tries to explore this problem at that time. So I hope you have understood it. So these are the four issues that I needed to cover today. I hope you have got a view about the medieval philosophies and how actually it advanced to the Renaissance. So the fourth issue, actually, when you deal with this, so you can see that how this idea of individualism and the existence of the individual, the individual mind and the influence of individual mind, how actually it ushers the way to the Renaissance period, right after this medieval philosophy, medieval age. So we can understand it from here. So do you have any question? Do you have any question?
No, sir.
Okay, so if you don't have any questions, then I'd like to conclude today's session here. And also I'd like to...
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I have a question, sir.
Yes, please.
স্যার এখানে যে একটু আগে যে মানে ডিসকাশন আপনি বললেন যে আমরা যে কালার বা যে কোনো কিছুকে যেটা নিজে ভাবি কি আসলে কি সেটাই, নাকি হচ্ছে আমাদের হিউম্যান থটের বাইরে গিয়ে যে না ওটা সত্যি ওই কালারই তাই আমরা ওইটা ভাবি, কোনটা স্যার? মানে এক্সাক্ট আমি এই বিষয়টা বুঝতে পারলাম না, যে আমরা যেটা ভাবি সেটাই কি ঠিক নাকি আমাদের থটের বাইরে এক্সাক্ট ওইটা আছে বলেই আমরা ওইটা থিঙ্ক করি?
For example, you can see some of the things, but there are lots of other things that, for example, in Amazon forest, maybe you didn't see. Maybe those things are also green. So can't we say that those are also green? So whether there are some substance, there are lots of other things that also exist beyond our human thought. Maybe we're not thinking about it. Maybe we haven't seen them. For example, creatures living under the sea, so under the ocean. So we haven't explored the whole ocean. So there are lots of other things are there. So things are there, but we don't know them. But does it make those things non-existent? আমি জানি না বলেই কি তাহলে ওই জিনিসগুলোর অস্তিত্ব কি নেই তাহলে? ব্যাপারটা কি এরকম?
No, sir.
Okay, so there are lots of things are there. So you need to think about it. So this is very highly philosophical arena where actually the philosophers, they have their different opinions about it. So you can agree or you can disagree. So it's your opinion, it's your mind, and you can take the liberty to have your own philosophy. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So any more questions? Anything else? Okay, if you don't have any more questions, I think we have run out of time. So I'd like to conclude today's discussion here, and also I'd like to extend my gratitude to you for your participation in this session. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Take care of yourself.